All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis, yeah.
How plants basically power life on Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you were, studying for your GCSEs or just fascinated by this whole process, this is the deep dive for you.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be using your concise GCSE notes to break this down.
Perfect.
And we're going to make it clear, memorable, and even a little bit surprising.
I like it.
So, what is photosynthesis, really?
I think it's almost like a magic trick
Oh, yeah.
because plants can take something we can't even touch, sunlight, and turn it into like sugar, an actual source of energy.
Wow.
It's kind of the basis of pretty much all life on Earth, every ecosystem.
Yeah, and so it's like they're running these little solar-powered sugar factories,
Exactly.
churning out fuel from thin air.
Yeah.
Now, I remember when I was in school, I struggled with that equation.
Yeah.
Like the actual, how do you explain that in a simple way?
Well, imagine, so plants take in carbon dioxide.
Okay.
That's what we breathe out. And they take in water. And then using the energy from sunlight, they transform those two things into glucose, which is a sugar,
Oh, wow.
and oxygen, which we breathe in. So
Okay.
it was like a perfect swap.
That is a really cool way to think about it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember for GCSEs, it was really important to remember, like, all those chemical symbols, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So what are those?
Okay, so we've got carbon dioxide is CO2.
CO2.
Water is H2O.
Right.
Glucose, which is the sugar, is C6H12O6. And oxygen is O2.
Okay, so we've got that basic recipe down.
Right.
But what I found fascinating is that there are all these factors that affect how well these plant sugar factories work.
Oh, tell me about it.
Things like temperature,
Yeah.
light, even the amount of chlorophyll, like that green stuff.
Yeah, it's like even the best factory can't run at top speed if it doesn't have the right conditions.
That's true.
Yeah.
So let's break down these factors.
Yeah, let's do it.
Kind of like a cheat sheet, to understanding how plants thrive.
Okay, great.
So first up, temperature.
Temperature, yeah.
Is it like a Goldilocks situation?
Yeah.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah, you got it. Because plants rely on enzymes, and these enzymes, they're like little helpers that speed up chemical reactions.
Huh?
But they're very picky about temperature. If it's too cold, they slow down.
Okay.
And if it gets too hot, they can actually break down and stop working.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so next on our cheat sheet, light intensity.
Okay.
So more light, more energy for these little sugar factories, right?
You would think so, yeah,
Yeah.
to a point, but there's a catch.
Oh,
Imagine a road, a single-lane road that leads to our sugar factory.
okay.
Now, even if we have tons of sunlight, which is like having a million cars, they can only get to the factory so fast because of that road.
So it's like a bottleneck,
Exactly.
even with plenty of sunlight.
Yeah.
Other things can become limiting factors
Yeah,
to how fast photosynthesis can happen.
precisely. Yeah,
And it could be things like, maybe the carbon dioxide, maybe there's not enough chlorophyll.
absolutely.
Okay, speaking of carbon dioxide, that's another key ingredient, right?
Yeah.
In our photosynthesis recipe.
It is.
It's like the air plants breathe.
Exactly. Yeah. And without enough CO2, those sugar factories, they can't work.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then we have chlorophyll, which gives plants their green color.
Yeah.
So chlorophyll, it's like the solar panel of the plant world,
That is a great way to put it. Yeah.
capturing that sunlight and kicking off the whole process.
Exactly. It allows plants to absorb that light energy and convert it into chemical energy in the form of sugar.
Okay, so we've got our cheat sheet of factors that affect photosynthesis.
Right.
But how do scientists actually measure how fast this whole process is happening?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, can we see these sugar factories churning out their product in real time?
Well, there are ways to measure it.
Okay.
Yeah. And a common method is by tracking the amount of oxygen produced, because that's a byproduct of photosynthesis.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So more oxygen bubbles, more photosynthesis happening.
Exactly.
That sounds like a fun experiment.
It is,
Like,
yeah.
how would you do that?
Well, there's a classic experiment using pondweed.
Okay.
Yeah, and you basically submerge a piece of pondweed in water, shine a light on it, and as the pondweed photosynthesizes, it releases oxygen, forming bubbles.
Oh, wow.
And you can measure those bubbles, and by measuring them, you track the rate of photosynthesis.
So it's like watching these tiny little oxygen factories at work.
Yeah, it is.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I imagine in an experiment like that, you have to control a lot of things to make sure the results are reliable.
You do, yeah. Controlling variables is key in any scientific experiment, right? You have to make sure that you're changing one factor at a time so you can isolate the effect of that one factor.
Right, so you wouldn't want to, like, change the temperature and the light and the CO2 all at the same time.
Exactly.
Because then you wouldn't know what's really causing those changes in those oxygen bubbles.
You wouldn't know what was causing it?
Yeah.
So it's about isolating that variable that you want to study and keeping everything else constant.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if you're a detective, you got to eliminate all the other suspects to find the real culprit.
That's a good analogy. So, uh, how do scientists visualize these results? I mean, do they just stare at a bunch of bubbles all day?
Well, not quite. They use graphs, to show the relationship between the different factors and the rate of photosynthesis.
Okay, graphs can be kind of intimidating.
They can, but think of them like a secret code that unlocks how photosynthesis works.
Oh, okay. I like that.
So let's say we're looking at how light intensity affects the rate of photosynthesis. We can plot that on a graph.
Right.
Light intensity on one axis and the rate of photosynthesis on the other.
Okay, so as you increase the light intensity, what happens to the rate of photosynthesis?
Initially, it goes up, more light, more energy for those sugar factories, but then eventually it kind of levels off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's like hitting a speed limit,
Exactly.
even though there's more light available.
Yeah,
So that's where those limiting factors come into play again.
it
It's
is.
like our single lane road.
It could be that there's just not enough CO2 to keep up with that increased light, or maybe the temperature isn't ideal
Right.
for those enzymes.
So one line on a graph can tell us a whole story
It can.
about what's limiting photosynthesis.
Yeah.
What if we want to compare different conditions, like say different temperatures?
Oh, we can do that. Add more lines to our graph.
Oh, okay.
So let's say we run the experiment at 2 different temperatures.
Okay.
We'll see 2 lines, and they might level off at different points, indicating that temperature is a limiting factor in one case, but not the other.
So by comparing those lines, we can see how different factors interact
Yeah,
and which one is playing the biggest role.
absolutely. Yeah,
It's like a puzzle.
it is a puzzle.
And these graphs can get even more complex, I imagine.
Oh, they can get really complex,
Yeah.
showing the interplay of multiple factors at once.
Wow. But even with all this complexity,
Yeah,
understanding these basic principles can help us in the real world.
absolutely.
Like, how farmers use this knowledge to grow more food.
Exactly. Yep.
It's not just, science experiments in a lab.
It's about feeding the planet.
Yeah, it's about feeding the planet.
Yeah.
So how do farmers use this?
Well, they use this understanding to optimize growing conditions.
Right.
Especially in greenhouses where they can control things like the temperature, the light intensity, even CO2 levels to create like the perfect environment for plant growth.
It's like they're giving those plants a VIP pass to the sugar factory.
They are, yeah.
They're manipulating those
Yeah.
limiting factors
Yep,
to boost plant growth and yields.
exactly.
Amazing. And there's one more concept related to light
Oh, yeah.
that's important to understand.
It is, yeah.
The inverse square law.
The inverse square law, yeah.
That sounds a little intimidating.
It does, but it's basically how light intensity changes with distance.
Okay.
So imagine you have a lamp shining on a plant. If you move that lamp twice as far away, the light intensity on the plant isn't just half as strong, it's actually only 1/4 as strong.
So the farther away the light source, the weaker the light.
Exactly.
That makes sense. It's like when I try to read a book under a dim lamp
Yeah.
versus being near a bright window.
Big difference.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah, and this is something that farmers and gardeners and even photographers have to consider when they're working with light.
It's amazing how a simple equation can reveal so much about how plants work.
Isn't it?
I mean, it's like they're harnessing the power of the sun.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Photosynthesis is truly the foundation of life as we know it.
It is. It's a reminder that even seemingly simple processes in nature are actually incredibly complex and beautifully orchestrated.
Well said. And it's a reminder that understanding these processes can empower us to make a positive impact.
Absolutely.
It's incredible, really, how something, like a plant can hold the key to so much of life on Earth.
It really is humbling when you think about it.
It is.
This process happening silently in every leaf,
Yeah,
that's what keeps us all going.
it really does. And it makes you wonder, what else is out there?
Right.
Like, waiting to be discovered.
What other secrets does nature have?
What other secrets? Yeah,
That's what's so exciting about science.
it is.
There's always more to learn,
Yeah.
more to explore.
Exactly.
Who knows what incredible things are just around the corner, just waiting for us to discover them.
Yeah, and it all comes down to our curiosity,
Absolutely.
wanting to understand the world.
Yeah.
So for all our listeners out there,
Huh?
whether you're, getting ready for your GCSEs
Yep.
or just fascinated by nature,
Mm-hmm.
keep asking questions.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.